Sing it together.
I've heard 1,000 stories of what they think you're like, but I've heard the tender whisper of love in the dead of night, and you tell me that you're pleased and that I'm never alone. You're
praise you.
The reason I'm wearing a jersey today, completely out of season, and I know it, I'm not unaware, is because the very first day that we began the book of James, I wore this jersey because the letter that James wrote to the believers that he was sending this letter to, they were people that are in the game. They're taking the hits. These are not people that are on the sidelines of life who just want to say, hey, let's have some really good conversation, some high theology. Let's really discuss the wonders of God and just go, oh, this is so beautiful. The letter was not written to that kind of people. The letter that James wrote was to people who were in the trenches. They were in the pain and the hurt and the conflict and the struggles of life every day, day in, day out. And they needed practical information. How do we do this life better? Because we're taking the hits and this really hurts. And we don't always know what the right decision is. And we just need some practical wisdom. We're in the middle of the game. Just give us something. And James wrote a letter to people who were in the game, who were in the battle, who were in the trenches, taking the hits, and they weren't on the sidelines. Today we're going to conclude the book of James. And he concludes with these words in James chapter 5, starting in 19, says, "My brethren, if any among you stray from the truth and one turns him back, let him know that he who turns a sinner from the error of his way will save his soul from death and will cover a multitude of sins." James says this because people like you and I, we do tend to stray from the truth at times. And when he says, if any among you strays from the truth, and he says that because this is a likely thing that is going to happen. In one way or another, every single one of us has the ability, and typically will at some point, we will drift. We will stray from the truth. Hebrews 4:12 says, "For the word of God is alive and active, sharper than any double-edged sword. It penetrates even to dividing soul and spirit, joints and marrow, and it judges the thoughts and attitudes of the heart." And at some point, we have all experienced the very sharp edge of the Word of God when it is being delivered to your heart. And it does have the ability to divide and to judge the thoughts and intents, the things that are going on inside of us. And it opens us up and leaves us open for God to be able to do a deep work inside of us. And that's why we have spent the last year and a half in the book of James. And I know some people are just cheering, going, we're finally done. And that's an okay response too. Yes, finally, what's next? We'll talk about that another time. But the reason why we sat in this book for so long and why we never rush through the book, why I've never rushed through any book, is because we've been allowing the Bible to do what it is the Bibles need to do, especially for those who have wandered away, because it has the power to turn us around when we have lost our way. It has the power to remind us that every single one of us can come home when we come home repentant. And when we do, when we come back to the love and embrace of God, it's there and it embraces us, it holds us, and it wraps its arms around us when we do that. And in these last two verses that James gives us, he's not actually talking to people who stray. This isn't written to people who've wandered away, calling them back. What this is these are men and women who, by their God-centered love and living, are doing the actual calling back of family and friends who are around them. It's being written to those people who are standing on the edge of the boat, throwing the life preservers into the water with a rope, trying to pull people back. People like that, when you do that, when you turn someone who is going in the wrong direction, going the wrong way, when you pull them back, you are saving their soul from death. And you're helping them to avoid a shipwrecked life. And you're helping them to enter back into that love and grace. And that covers a multitude of sins. And turning people back when they're going a different direction, when people are wandering away, when people are straying, and you try to pull them back, typically they don't like that. That is not a comfortable place. That is not it's not a direction that they're wanting to leave. And oftentimes when you try to pull people back, they're going to be resented and misunderstood. Ask any parent who tries to correct their kid. When you're trying to turn people back, there is anger and resentment, because that is true. we started to talk about three things that we need to understand in this particular ministry of pulling people back, because that is what James is challenging that we get to do, what we need to do. He said there's three things you need, kind of three areas that we need to be able to talk about to be able to do that effectively. To help people come back who have lost their way, that is the very heart, that is the very center of the heart of God. And we saw that in the story of the prodigal son, where it reveals the heart of God, the heart of a father. And when he sees his son returning from having wandered off, returning now in repentance, the father did not mock him, didn't berate him, didn't insult him, didn't do anything except celebrate his return. Said, this son of mine who was dead is now alive. He has returned. He was dead and he's alive. He was lost. Now he's found. And he's strayed, but he's home. And we're going to celebrate. And he was full of joy. And it was full of excitement. This is exactly what I want to see happen every single day. And the joy of the Father is reveals the heart of God for this exact ministry. The heart of God for this is the call of God in every single one of us, which is to bring people back. And that is what we are meant to be about, is helping people return to life, saving people from death. And this requires more than just the heart of God. And this requires more than just the call of God. If we're going to do this is going to require the wisdom of God. Because not everyone who strays do we treat the same way. And here's where it gets really fuzzy and kind of different gray areas and tough. Because at one point, the father ran to embrace his son, and he grabbed him and he held him. But at another point in that same story, he had to let him go and said, you need to go make the choices that you're going to make, and I'm going to let you. And I'm not running after you. And there was a time when the worst thing that the father could have done was to reach out and go after that son. Because that son, for him to be able to come back, to be able to come to repentance, it required that he feel the full, entire weight of his behavior and the consequences that came with that. So knowing what to do and when to do it, that is going to require wisdom on our part. Because sometimes we have to let people run, and sometimes we pick them up and we bring them back. Sometimes we let them go, and the scary thing is if you bring them back when you need to be letting them go, you're not going to do them any good. On the other hand, if you let someone go who needs to be picked up, who's wounded and damaged, and they just need someone to embrace them, and if you don't do it, if you're too busy trying to berate them, you're going to do irreparable damage, which puts us in a very tense place. So how do you do what and when? How do you know when to do which response? Well, we're just going to do three broad kind of categories or three scenarios that I just want to share this morning that will help us. So what do you do, first of all, when someone stumbles? That would be the first thing. They just stumble. They're just struggling. Galatians 1. Here we have a specific instruction on what to do when we see someone who stumbles. And the helpful piece is to get an idea of where, kind of what this person is and who they are. It says, brothers and sisters, if someone is caught in sin, you who live by the Spirit, you're filled with the love of God. You should restore that person gently. But watch yourselves or you may be tempted. And the word caught there, where it says if someone is caught in sin. In the Greek, that brings an element of surprise. It's a word that's like, oh, I didn't see that coming. It's a bit of a shock where I just stumbled into it. And the word sin means I have gone astray, or you've stumbled, or you have fallen. So the person, you got to picture who this person is. I go, okay, this is a person who loves God. They're running this race of endurance that is in front of them, and they recognize Jesus as their Savior, the author, perfecter of their life. And this person, they want to finish the race well, this life well. They're like, God, I really want to do this. That is truly my heart. I want to run to you with everything that I have. But somewhere along this course of running the race, they get distracted. And many things could do that. You could get discouraged or just pain in life. Sometimes it's a fear. Sometimes we just get exhausted at different times in our life, and you don't feel like you can run, and you start to make some bad choices, and you make a mistake, and maybe you compare yourself and your journey to someone else's journey, and you're watching, well, they're running so well, and you just kind of take your eyes off, and you start comparing, and they're running faster, they're running better, and I'm not doing a very good job. Why am I even doing this? And you're trying to run this race, but you're just getting really frustrated, and then I start to take my eyes off Christ. And sometimes what could cause the distraction is a temptation where you're running along and you're running the race, but there's just, whoa, what is that? Whoa, that looks good too. And it grabs your attention, and you're not looking to ruin your life or do anything wrong, but this thing was just so pretty over there. And I turned my eyes, and when I did, I wasn't watching where I was running. I wasn't watching what might be at my feet, and there was something there, and I stopped and I wiped out. I wasn't doing anything wrong. I wasn't trying to crash. I wasn't trying to hurt myself. But then the next thing you know, you're face down in the gravel, and you've got blood on your knees, and you're spitting out rocks from between your teeth. Galatians 5:7, you were running well. Who hindered you from obeying the truth? Every one of us at some point, every single one of us, we have stumbled. And every single one of us at some point has fallen. And maybe it was physically, you could relate to this. I'm hoping it would be spiritually, because spiritually, every single one of us at some point have, if we were going to get honest. We've done this in one way or another. And as you're lying there on the ground, physically, spiritually, you start assessing the damage that's done to your body. What are the areas that are screaming in pain? And two things are starting to go through your mind. You start to have these two questions. And the first question is, how did I get here? What is it? How did it? I mean, this is not how I saw this scenario playing out at the beginning of the race. I mean, I was gonna run well. This was going to be such a good race. I was going to win. I was going to do it. I was running, trying to win this thing. How did I even get here? And what happened? And the second question that starts to come into your mind is, as you're starting to feel these areas of deep pain and searing pain even, is, am I ever going to run again? Did I do too much damage? How much damage has happened to my body? Can I run again? And the interesting thing about that second question is, am I going to run again? Is that in some cases it has to do more, whether you're going to run again, has to do more with the person who comes to help you than even the damage that happened to you. It has to do more with the person who ministers to you. When you have stumbled and you have blood on your knees and you're spitting stones out between your teeth spiritually, who it comes to you at that point and how they treat you is going to be very critical. Many of us, when we see people crash, we might overreact, and many of us have been even victims of this, where maybe in an overreaction, where someone stumbled and there's this horror, and I can't believe they fell. I can't believe that person fell. Well, they sure let me down. Well, I thought they were better than that, or that. We just you kind of jump on them, and we actually can do more damage and crush that person who stumbled and fell because I thought they were better, and they're not. I'm cutting them out of my life. Well, they deserve that. We get this anger, and we want to call it righteousness. And that would ensure that they never run again, or at least it will do damage. If they do run again, it will at least possibly cause damage that will take more healing and more recovery than maybe was initially necessary. And by running, when I mean running, what I don't mean is I don't mean that we will accomplish things in this world. I'm just talking about the life of abundance and full of the Spirit of God and the joy of the Lord. That's all I'm talking about. Running that life. Another huge mistake is sometimes in reaction to people who have fallen, sometimes we might go the opposite extreme, because I don't want to be that guy, I don't want to be that jerk And I don't want to bring these challenging words to the people who've fallen, so I'll become more passive in my actions and my words because I want to kind of minimize the damage, or maybe I'll even ignore or run past them because I don't know what to do, so I'll just ignore and, I'm just going to focus on my race. Ignoring maybe the sin or the wound that is happening in those around us. But loving people is the heart of God, and they are in need of healing. And some of those who have wounded, it's going to take time for those wounds to heal. And sometimes the pain of even cleaning the wound is more painful than the actual wound itself. Setting that bone that has been broken or put out of joint. Two mistakes: overreaction, crushing people, or underreaction, ignoring the severity of the sin and even the wound. Which is why Galatians 6:1, you who live by the Spirit should gently restore that person. You who live by the Spirit, because no one else can. No one else can do the real restoration on a brother or sister who stumbles. Because immature people they'll fall into one of the two extremes where, we can see someone stumble and maybe even take great joy in it. I don't know if you've ever done that. I'll admit that I have. I'm sad to say, and I'm sure you've experienced it or seen it, where, this outward horror and indignation, oh, that's so sad. Yeah. Where I'm happy that a brother or sister have fallen on their face and they're spitting out gravel, that'll teach them to look so good and arrogant. And I don't really know if they're arrogant, but I think they are. They just look too good. It's a wonderful opportunity for an immature person, full of sin person, to feel superior because someone else stumbled. Those people will be absolutely useless in real restoration to people who have fallen down. Another group that is absolutely useless are those who, with sloppy agape, tell the person that their sin and their damage, it's not a big deal. Don't worry about it. Whatever, we all do it. It'll work itself out. But the sin that person fell into, a big deal, and the consequences are great, it's also not the end for you. So what do you do when someone has fallen into sin and they're bloody and bruised? It says you restore that person gently. And the word restore here simply means bring them back to the former condition. It means to mend broken bones. And it refers to putting dislocated limbs back into joints. That this man or this woman who has fallen and fallen badly is now who is in great pain, that one day they can hope to stand again and one day they can hope to run again. But even with this imagery of bones and dislocated hips, it implies a process of recovery. And it speaks to time that you might need before you can ever run again. Before you can even get involved in ministry again, a time that you need to heal and a time that you have to assess and do some internal work as to what it is that made you susceptible to falling in the first place. And the only people who are capable of bringing that kind of restoration are not immature people, but those who are filled with the Spirit of God. By the wisdom of God, they respond appropriately, who may know how to deep clean the rocks out of people's knees and their hands that is embedded, and how to even do stitches, and how to bring antiseptic. And it is seldom fun, but it brings restoration. So you who do that, do it gently, because you're walking on holy ground in people's lives at that moment. And it doesn't mean that every act that you do is going to be gentle. I don't know how many of you, when your kids fell, off a bike, or they get this road rash, and they just had this gravel embedded. I mean, it was deep in their hands and their elbows and their knees, and you're, we're going to scrub that. Okay, look over there, scrub! And they're, That was my daughter. That was her impression of Taryn. Because that's what she would do. You distract and then you scrub real fast until she could pull her hand away, her knee away, whatever it was. But you had to do it. And it felt like torture to her that the pain of cleaning was worse than the wounding itself. And it felt like torture. And some of you, When you've had someone in your life confront you with really heavy pattern that led you to do the sin, it didn't feel gentle when you were confronted and you hated every second of it. But the spirit of gentleness, a spirit of gentleness is different when it's brought in that kind of confrontation, because it helps people look at their sin without having maybe to flinch and get defensive, where we know we're not going to get hammered, but that doesn't mean that we're still not going to do the deep work. And let me tell you why we need to do this gently. Because when people stumble, not only are they physically hurt, they're emotionally embarrassed, and they're also humiliated. Years ago, a bunch of friends and I were riding our bikes, and I was riding a mountain bike, and we were riding around, we were in Ellensburg, and I was riding on the sidewalk because we're like a gang, and so, we were not in this beautiful single file row. We were all over, so I had taken the sidewalk to not crash. Anyhow, the sidewalk ended, and they were getting ready to redo the sidewalk, and so they had put all this gravel in there. It was like this little pea gravel. The second my tires hit that, my bike stopped immediately, and we were going at a fast clip, and so I didn't stop, but the bike did. And I did this beautiful, literally beautiful full flip over. And I thought I was about to land on my feet. I'm like, this is going to work out. I did not stick that one. I continued to rotate before I finally landed, and it was a bloody mess. And I was in a lot of pain. But worse than the pain, I was really embarrassed. I was with all these college kids, and here I am, like 35, and here's all these 19-year-olds who are so cool. And I was trying to be cool, and suddenly their pastor's all bloody and in pain, and they were so kind, but I was so embarrassed. People stumble and people fall physically, and people stumble and fall into sin. And we're not talking about people who have a heart of rebellion. We're not talking about those kind of people right now. We're not talking about people with arrogance are trying to run away and do their own thing and saying, God, I don't care about you. It's just someone, they're running well. They're just living life. And the heart of that person was to finish well. They really did. And they wanted to serve God with their whole heart, and they made a mistake. They made a horrible mistake. And it came with hard consequences, and you know there might be some limping for a while. But you don't crush people like that. You don't put people like that out. You don't kick them out. You pick those kinds of people up. You restore them with a spirit of gentleness. And one reason is because, as embarrassing and humiliating as it is, the real thing is that every single one of us could be there too tomorrow. Every one of us. That could be you. That could be me. Because every one of us will stumble. Back to Galatians 6:1. The end says, but watch yourselves, or you may also be tempted. And the thing is, James has been talking about this. In chapter 3, verse 2, he affirms it. He says, we all stumble in many ways. Every single one of us. We've been there. One day I'm going to stumble, and I'm going to need someone to come alongside and pick me up. And you may stumble, and that's when I get to come alongside you or someone else. We get to come alongside each other and pick each other up. And we do it in gentleness because I know what that feeling is. I know that feeling. I know that embarrassment. I know the fear. I know the humiliation. So does that mean that we take the consequences away? Absolutely not. I'm not saying that. I'm going to come beside you, and I'm going to help you stand up again, and I'm going to do it with gentleness because one day I may be stumbling because every single one of us will. So first, when someone stumbles, you pick them up. Second of all, when someone strays and wanders off, when they have wandered away, you bring them back. Matthew chapter 18 talks about little children who wander away from home. And if they do go, you go get them, bring them back. And if one person can't do it, then two of you go do it. And in the worst case scenario in this chapter, it's ultimately is that you let them go. It says in verse 15, if your brother or sister sins. The word sin here, it means to miss the mark, to be in error. It's not really so much as falling down as much as the person who, they just kind of wandered away. Kind of like a sheep or a cow. They love the shepherd. They do. They love the shepherd. They trust the shepherd. They want to stay with the shepherd, but they weren't really paying attention to what it was they're doing. And they're just searching for food because I'm hungry, because we all get hungry. And it just seems, man, I got my head down and I'm eating, and then I'm oh, there's food there. And you follow the food because it tastes so good. And I'm not leaving the shepherd because he's a bad shepherd. I'm not leaving because I'm mad. I'm not leaving because I'm angry. Has nothing to do with the shepherd. I'm just a moron who's following the food because it's good. And they wander away. And as they go away, they're not really paying attention. And suddenly they put their head up and they look around like, I have no idea where I am. I don't even know how I got here. I mean, I was just eating. I didn't even know I was moving. And then I don't even know how to get back. And they're convinced, I don't even know that I can come back because I have no idea what direction to even go back to. They wandered away. This isn't, again, a hard-hearted rebellion. This is just an immaturity involved, a lack of paying attention involved. I don't know if any of you have lost one of your kids. I did the other day, 2 days ago, lost one of my girls. We're all walking on the road in our neighborhood, and the one she's always right next to me, and she's always right here. Suddenly I look up, she's not here. I ask, hey, Emma, where is she? And she's gone. We don't know. None of us have a clue. We're starting to yell through the neighborhood. Where are you? No one answers. We start all going different directions. Turns out she decided she was cold and ran home. But that was actually the last place I thought, because she also likes to be silly, and she likes to hide, and she likes to play jokes. It wasn't a joke. She just went home. And she had no idea for about 15, 20 minutes, every single one of us. The thing is, I sent one kid home to see if she was there. He found her. Oh, she's at home, so he stayed there too. She was fine. And nothing's going to happen in my neighborhood, but I was concerned. I just wanted to know where she was. And when you find them, you don't pick them up, you don't berate them. You embrace them, and you bring them back, and you give them instruction. Next time you do this, here's how we can do it better so that I don't freak out as the one who loves you and wants to care for you. And maybe you have to set up new boundaries, and maybe you have to give them discipline. I didn't think I needed to in that situation. And it might be, in their life, it might be a little unpleasant when they have wandered away and we need to set up new boundaries and parameters for them. You don't crush them, you bring them back. And it says, if your brother or sister wanders away, go to the point out their fault just between the two of you. Some of you have experienced this where people come up to you and go, you have really blown it, and let me just share with you, and how dare you, and you really screwed up, and what are you thinking? What are you, a moron? And maybe it's just me. No, and you realize, I don't know. I have experienced that. I'll just speak for myself. They made it a big deal when it did not have to be a big deal. But in the business of reproving someone in private, it doesn't have to, this isn't meant to be a big deal. Sometimes we go, well, I have the authority of Scripture now to go correct them. That is not what this is. This is people who are in a healthy, loving relationship, like families or healthy churches. This happens almost every day, all the time. This is a very common occurrence. In the course of our life, this happens between best friends. It's like my best friend telling me, Kenny, what are you doing? That was a dumb thing. I know. You're right. Or Kenny, that was a weird thing to think. Tell me, I don't understand that. Or that was a goofy direction. Why did you do that? I don't know. We'll just start talking about it. It's not meant to be coming in, crushing people's souls, and you're screwing up. We're just talking about life, and we're re-guiding each other gently. It just happens in the course of life. And it comes from people who love you and know you, and they're just steering you like sheep back to the shepherd. It's not because you're intentionally doing something wrong. You didn't even know that you had wandered off. Hey, it's not a big deal, but we do need to come back. I think this happens in healthy families and in healthy churches. It's not, well, I'm here to correct you and reprove you. This just happens in relationship. It happens because people's hearts are tender. And I really want to follow the shepherd. And I feel really, really grateful when we do have those conversations, that it helps me come back. It's not kicking people out. This is not a hard-hearted rebellion. That would be a different issue. This is just wandering sheep. that you gently love and bring back. And it happens in the normal course of your life with people that you love and that you live with, and you call them back as they're kind of wandering off. And if you're dealing with sheep who really care about the shepherd, they will come back. They will come back if they love the shepherd. But not everyone does come back, and that's where we then move on. It says, back to the scripture, if they listen to you, you have won them over, verse 16. But if they will not listen, take one or two others alongside you so that every matter may be established by the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses. This verse has been one of the most abused verses, or a verse that's used to abuse others, we'll say. Because sometimes people come not to reprove and correct people for sin. They come because that person didn't do what I wanted them to do. And out of a need to control and to maybe see myself as an authority, I would use that verse to slap people. And you've gone to them and you didn't want to, they didn't do it the way that you wanted it done. And so you go and you try to correct people, or they've tried to correct you, but it wasn't because you were wandering away from God. It's kind of, well, the direction of the church isn't the direction that I want to go. So let's get a few people, get around them, and we're going to correct them. It happened in this church. I can think many of you know that it's a pretty, well, I don't know how famous the story is in our church, but a woman was corralled in our church because she's a Democrat, and the Republicans gathered around her and slapped her emotionally, spiritually. How dare you? Who are you to love? How can you love God and be a Democrat? And you're wrong. And she left the church for a while, a very long while, because she just got, it was not even we're like 2 or 3, we gathered together to come correct this woman of the error of her political ways. It was never a sin issue. It was never a God issue. It was, you're not looking how we want you to look and acting how we want you to act and voting who it is we want you to vote for. It was just an opinion. So what do they do in the name of Matthew 18 is they get 2 or 3 and they gang up on you. And now you've got a victim. And this is an abuse of the verse. The real way this verse was meant to be fleshed out is that now you have this sheep that wandered away. And we want them to come back, but they've kind of resisted it a little. Your friend, the person that you love, they've kind of pulled back. And in an effort to not let them pull away, you know what? Let's get a few more friends, close friends, people who are in close relationship with them, because we care about that person. I so care about them. I see that the direction they're going is going to cause damage to them and to others. And so now we get a few friends. Let's go talk to them. Let's let a few others know, and let's see if we can help them. Verse 17, and if they still refuse to listen, then tell it to the church. And when I hear this, as I have grown up, what I imagined, and one of the things I hated about the church, though this is my imagery, it had nothing to do with the reality of what this verse is, but in my mind, it's now we've got to put it up on, we're going to put their sin up on the screen, and everyone's going to know about it, and we're going to shame them back. We're going to announce it on a Sunday morning, maybe even send out an email. I might even put it on Facebook. I'll tag everyone on it. That's kind of in my mind what this verse was telling me to do. I'm going to tell it to the church, and then everyone in the community is going to know. If a brother or sister has begun to wander away, and you're trying to bring them back, the church should be, here's what the healthy place, here's what it should look like. The church would be those only people who are in relationship with them. That is the church. It does not mean we bring it to the whole church on a Sunday morning. That is not this. But you bring it to the people that are in their sphere of influence. Those are the only ones that need to know. You have a wandering brother or sister, and you love them like crazy. And we think they love God. And we're going to do everything that we can. So we want everyone who knows them to know what's going on, so that if you run into them, when you meet them, when you talk to them, don't tell them everything that they're doing is okay, because it's not okay what they're doing. This is serious. And if you talk to them at all, talk about this. Talk about the truth of God. Talk about that with them. There's a difference between calling people back with the truth and calling people to the church. It doesn't matter whether they leave the church. If you want to leave this church, you're free to do that. I would miss you like crazy, but that's not that you have that freedom, and I will love you. It's not about wandering away from the Bridge Church. I pray that if that is your fear, that you have to keep going. I release you of all fear of that. What this is we're called to bring the body of people back to those who have strayed away from the truth, to call them back to God. Several years ago, I was working at a church, and someone on staff was making some really bad choices, and I didn't know about it. I didn't know what they were doing. It was an intern who was working at the church, and I heard later that he was confronted, and then a group of friends actually came and tried to encourage them to change and bring them back, to God, what they're doing, call them back to the truth. But his behavior continued to happen. And the denials came, and the circle of those who knew what he was doing, it started to broaden bigger and bigger and bigger as he continued to walk in that direction and making those decisions. And more people kept trying to come to him to love him and bring him back. And as more of us started to hear, finally it hit me, and kind of where I heard it. And we were not trying to call him back to the job that he was doing in church, not back to the church. But we were trying to call him back to the safety of family. And time after time, promises of change were given, but no change ever happened. And it happened over and over and over again. And there came a point that after you have done that over and over and over, it became clear he didn't want to come back. He didn't actually want to change the behaviors. He didn't want to come back to the truth. And at that point, you let him go. It says, and if they refuse to listen even to the church, treat them as you would a pagan or a tax collector. Because at this point, you're not dealing with a stumbling brother or a sheep that has wandered off. You're dealing with a prodigal. On the front end of the story, before repentance, when he wanted to do his own thing and go his own way, that's exactly what the Father let him do. He said, I'm going to let you go. I'm going to let you. I am not going to stop you. I still love you. I still value you. My heart breaks for you, but I'm going to let you go. And the toughest thing you'll ever do is to treat people like a pagan or a tax collector. And in no way is that ever meant to be mean, evil, shunning. I cut you out of my life. That has nothing to do with this. Some of you parents have done this, and you know this road. And there's nothing that you can do to take away that pain, but know this, that you have experienced something of the heart of God when the lost creation has wandered away from him. You know what it feels like to stand somewhat in the shoes of God, to know what it feels like for the creation to walk away from you. And just let that in. God is in touch with the feelings of our pain, and he knows what the heart of a parent feels like, because God, your Father, feels the same thing when he lets his kids go, when they've decided that they want to live how it is that they want to live. And he says, okay, I'll let you. And at that point, the worst thing that you can do to someone who has made it very clear that they want to live they want to live the way they want to live is to go and bail them out. It's one of the worst things you can do. To pay their debt and to bring them home would be the worst thing, because they will never get well if they don't feel the full weight of the consequences of the direction of their life. So you have to take off the protection away from them. There is an incredible value to pain, because when people experience pain, they will react. So pain is a gift because it breaks through denial. And if you protect an addict from the pain, then you prolong the cycle. And if you relieve people of consequences, you ensure that they never continue to run in the direction that they're running. And so sometimes you have to let them go, and sometimes you put them out. Ouch. And that happens when they start to affect the rest of the body, which is the third point. 1 Corinthians 5:1. It is actually reported, which means everyone knows about this. Even those that aren't in the church know about this one. That there is sexual immorality among you, of a kind that even pagans don't tolerate. A man is sleeping with his father's wife. A man is sleeping with his stepmom. This guy is not a stumbling brother. He's not a wandering sheep. This is willful, arrogant sin. I'm going to do what it is I want to do because I'm just going to do it. And what this passage is correcting is not the person who's making this decision. This passage is talking to the church that is tolerating it. And you are proud. Well, who is proud? The church who is tolerating it. Shouldn't you rather have gone into mourning and have put out of your fellowship the man who's been doing this? Put him out? Remove the guy? What about loving and caring for him? Because that's what we've been talking about. If you were to then go into 2 Corinthians, the next letter, you'd find out that this very man was actually restored. We actually get the end of his story here. He came back. In order to come back, he needed to fall on his face with the gravity of his sin. And that doesn't guarantee that people will come back in any way, though. But it is their only hope. When you get to this place where you put someone out, and this is a really tough place, the priority of the father or the mother or the church or the small group, at some point, we're not talking about the restoration of a person who's really making bad, willful, strong, damaging choices. At some point, we've got to talk about how do I make sure everyone else is safe in the process? Verse 6, don't you know that a little yeast leavens the whole batch of dough? Get rid of the old yeast. Their rebellion and decision to run after the things that they want to run after, it's gotten to the point where in a family or in a church situation, that it begins to damage the people. It starts damaging relationships. You still care for that person, you love that person, you want that person to be restored. And this radical move may be their only hope for restoration and healing because nothing else seems to be grabbing their attention. The priority at this level of discipline, it's not that person's restoration, it is the protection of everyone else. The flock, the family, the protection of the bride. Let me just say, this rarely happens. This does not happen often. I've only seen this happen once in all of my years of ministry. We had a guy in my college ministry. He was a sexual predator and a narcissist. And what he was doing is in the church, and we had about 300-400 college kids, about 55 to 60% were girls. So we had 200 to 250 girls, college girls, that came every week to the college ministry. And so this guy started coming who was going after the high school and college girls, trying to have sex with as many as he could have. And he tried to put on the right Christian religious talk, and a few girls even got pregnant. And a couple of them could have even been prevented had the girls also listened. They had a part in this too. I tried to warn one of them, and a month later, she was pregnant. I was like, stay away from this guy. She wouldn't. The thing is he had admitted his behavior to me, but he denied that it was really an issue. He denied that it was a problem. At least he didn't care. He didn't see it as a problem. And he denied that it was even sin. And he didn't see that what he was doing was wrong or offensive, being a sexual predator. And it made him dangerous because he didn't think he was doing anything wrong and needed to be stopped. So there are people in this room, because we all do, at something. There's some in this room, we all struggle with some issue of sin, if not multiple issues. And we are all welcome here as long as we understand the weight of our sin, of kind of what it's doing, as long as we're open and honest and trying to work through it. And we're trying to deal with that. But when you act as if, well, there's nothing wrong and there's nothing damaging with what it is that I'm doing, with my behaviors, that's when you become dangerous. And that is when you start to leaven the body. And it started with me talking to him. And then I started to talk with some of his friends. Hey, this guy, he is a loose cannon, and we've got some serious damage and things are going on. And so I brought in a few others, and that wasn't going. So then I had to bring it up to the church staff, and we brought it up to the board of the church, and we started to try and administer some discipline to him. And he, one of the things is he couldn't go to the college ministry, and he balked at that, and then he couldn't come to church. And he started coming in. He would sneak in every door, and he would come back and disrupt church, and he wanted to do what it is that I caught him to do. And one day, I caught him slinking around the church hallways, and so eventually we had to get a restraining order put on the guy. trying to legally find some way to keep him out of the building so that if he did it again, we could get some legal help, call in the police department to bring him in and get him out on a Sunday or a Tuesday night, saying we're going to be serious about the protection of this body of girls that he was trying to prey on. And in that whole experience, it was really difficult. And I didn't know how to do that because it was going against everything I thought I was supposed to be doing, which is to continue to try and love him and work with him and encourage him. And the thing is we never once received a letter of complaint from anyone to tell us that what we were doing, that they were offended by putting a restraining order on a 22-year-old man. But what I did get was a lot of phone calls and notes and emails from people who were telling me how protected they felt, at least, by knowing that we were taking legal steps to keep him and them safe and keep him out of church. And I hope that doesn't ever happen again. I hope that's just a rare occurrence. But there are times that you have to put people out. But even when it comes to that extreme, hear the heart of God in Jeremiah 13:15. But if you will not listen, there will be judgment, but my soul will sob in secret for your pride. My eyes will weep bitterly and run down like tears, because the Lord's flock has been taken captive by their sin. But I'm going to sob for your, in secret for your pride, because they're unwilling. So I'm going to let you go. And of all the people in this room who can identify with the heart of God relative to lost children who would not come home, it would be parents who know what it feels like to have little ones who have stumbled, and when they stumbled, you picked them up. Because you remember when your kids fell. You know when your kids fell and they scraped their knees, and they thought you were so mean for digging the rocks out of their cuts, but you knew exactly what it was that they needed. And you didn't kick them out, but you picked them up and you embraced them and you helped them and you did what you're supposed to do. And when they've wandered away, you've pulled them back. And when they fell down, when they were older, you knew you couldn't spare them from all the consequences as they got older. And they're gonna have a lot of pain, and it was probably going to take some time for them to recover. And some of the first aid emotionally that you began to give them, they didn't appreciate. They felt like that was painful too. And they didn't appreciate the first aid trying to help them, but you did it with gentleness, hoping that they would be restored, and you embraced them. And when they wandered away, you pulled them back again. And when they wandered away, you pulled them back. And when they wandered away, you kept pulling them back again and again and again. And then it dawned on you that they only wanted to come back to the house, but they didn't actually want to come back to the truth. And so finally you had to let them go, but they didn't want to live with the rules of the house, and it was causing these damage. They didn't want to abide by the rules, and they're hurting people. So you had to put them out, and when you did, they thought you didn't care about them, and they said things like, "I hate you," or "You never even loved me. You're the worst parent ever. You're the worst Christian ever." And they left convinced that you were so mean and that you didn't care at all. And when they walked out the door, you did what God did. You sobbed in silence at their pride. And you cried literally because that son or that daughter had been taken captive by their own sin. And because of that, they had to go. And hopefully, feeling the full weight of the consequences of their sin, they'll return one day like the prodigal, and that's what we're praying for. And when they do, the heart of a parent, it leaps for joy, where you just like put the robe on their back and the ring on their finger and the sandals on their feet. You grab them, you embrace them. This daughter of mine was dead, but now they're alive. They were lost, but now they're found. And the heart of God explodes with amazing grace, but not without repentance, not cheap, sloppy agape where we pretend everything's okay when it's not okay, and until everything has been dealt with. To do this ministry, and this is a hard ministry. This is a ministry for mature men and women filled with the Spirit of God. People who see the world as parents see the world. This is what we are called to do. To people who have wandered away, to embrace them and invite them to come back home, because that is the heart of God. It is the passion of God. And it requires the wisdom of God, because not everyone who strays do you deal with the same way. When someone stumbles, you restore them gently. You pick them up. When someone wanders away, you bring them back. And when they make it clear they don't want to come back, and they don't want to deal with the things in their heart and soul, they don't want to change their way, you let them go, and sometimes you put them out, and you do all of that knowing this. James 5:20. Let him know that he who turns a sinner from the error of his way will save his soul from death and will cover a multitude of sins. And that is what we are about. And this ends the study in the book of James. Thank you, James. Thank you, thank you. Thank you. Communion is available as we go back into worship. I do want to, if you know people or if you're needing prayer for anything, we want to pray with you. If there's someone that you have a heart for that if you're just grieving someone, really, you can ask me to pray. Any of us would pray. Any single one of us would pray with you. You know that is our heart. That's all of our hearts. It's an honor to pray with each other, and you guys know that so clearly. And if it's to pray for someone that you have a heart for, we'll do that. If it's you, we'll pray with you. But the communion table is open. As we continually, week after week after week, we do it together. We come and we make our request known to God. God, we want to know you more. We want to connect to you. I want to submit my life to you. Thank you for your body broken and your blood shed for the forgiveness of my sins, so that I can come to you directly, God, so that I who have wandered away this week can come back and fill me again with your Spirit. I identify with you. I give my life again to you. And that is the heart of communion. So, Father, I pray that by your Spirit, that the things that we have learned in the book over the last 2 years, that we're not even going to remember all the details. God, there are 51 sermons here, and there's no way we can remember even a handful of them. But I pray that the things that we did learn may have even been absorbed into us and a part of our lives, that you would seal that by your Spirit, the things that you planted in us, that were watered by your Spirit, that these truths will continue to grow and flourish as we continue to keep our eyes on you, even as we are aware that sometimes, God, I do stray, that we do stray. So bring us back, Father, bring us back. Bring us back. Bring us back, Father, bring us back by the word of your truth.